Hello everyone, welcome back to Threes to Wound. My name's Reese and today we're going to be looking at those big golden boys of power and of course their girlfriends, well not girlfriends but the sisters of silence. The Sisters of Silence will also be there. So we're going to have a bit of a look, a bit of a breakdown of them. So let's jump in. So if you're watching this video, you're watching this video for one reason alone. You either love the Talons of the Emperor and Kill Team, or you hate them and you want to know how to crush their tiny, insignificant souls into pieces. It's one of those two. You seem to love them or hate them. And this guide hopefully will give you a little bit of an insight into, well, what's good about them, what's bad, and what does their playstyle work towards? How does it work? Now, I will be emotionally impartial. I've had some experiences playing the Adeptus Custodes on the battlefield in Kill Team. Gone are the days of the 4 APL fiasco that we had. We've obviously had the FAQ by this point, so Brotherhood of the Demigods has also been nerfed. So a big part of the two key issues that made them so strong out of the box and made them probably feel for a lot of players a little bit broken. Those issues have been addressed in a lot of ways. They are still by no means a pushover of a team. They do feel like the elite of the elite in the far-flung universe. They're a problem. They've still got 3 APL. They still shoot really well. They still hit like a truck. In close combat, they can still shoot really well. And even when you go, oh, let's water them down and add in the Sisters of Silence, they're still great units and they've still got some great utility. So it's not necessarily that they become less effective with those units. They just become a different team. They have a different playstyle. In my humble opinion, the Adeptus Custodes and the Death Guard are still two of the best teams to start the game with, or to get back into it, or to start a team just to learn the rules. And the reason is they're hugely forgiving. It's not that they're broken, it's not that they're necessarily 100% better than other teams, but their survivability is really, really high, and that helps negate some mistakes. They can fight their way out of sticky situations, they can shoot their way out of it, and they can get a lot of board control, and they don't really die. The drawback being here, if you are going to play purely Custodes models, so just the 4 models is what you'll get in that, and we'll look at the fire team shortly, but you do have the negative of not having many models on the board, and losing each one hurts significantly more. It's a quarter of your team gone with every one of those deaths. They're not invincible, as much as they feel like it at times. If you play them poorly, you will still be punished for it. But if you make one mistake or a small mistake, it's less likely to cost you the operative, unlike some other teams. They also don't have a whole bunch of heavy weapons. So if you're into things like melter guns, plasma, things like that, even once you add the sisters in as well, they're obviously bringing flamers to the mix and normal bolters, but yeah, you're not really getting too much AP weapons. There is some P1 shenanigans going on some of the bolter weapons, but yeah, nothing that's going to give you that damage or hit like you get in a plasma or melter gun. So let's have a quick look at the fire teams that you've got available to you. The first one is the Custodian Guard fire team. So taking one of these is 2 operatives. Yes, you heard that correctly. It's only 2 operatives. One of them being your leader. If you're going to take these guys, I think your Custodian should always be your leader. There's really no benefit to having one of the Sisters of Silence be your leader if you do end up taking a combination of fire teams. So stick with one of your Custodes as your leader. And they can be equipped with the Sentinel Sword and the Storm Shield. That's hard to say. Or just the Custodian Spear. We'll look a little bit closer at the weapons when we look at the units. But yeah, there's great utility in those 2 options, and there's different reasons you'd want to take both. In my very humble opinion, the best way to take the Custodes is to take 2 fire teams of these guys. It's 4 units, one of them's your leader, and you can equip them mixing and matching with those weapons, depending either A, what you've got modeled if you already have these models, or B, what you think is going to suit the mission objective. It's very easy to make a full roster for these guys, because if you're taking just Custodes, there's not much. But I think that's a lack of flavor and not much fun if you don't add in some Sisters of Silence. Number one, these sculpts, these models are really, really cool. I really love them, but they add some much needed utility in this team as well. You're getting 5 operatives in the Sisters of Silence team, and they come in 3 different varieties. Prosecutor, Witch Seeker, and Vigilator. Apart from fancy names, the main difference here is just what weapons they're carrying, and that ranges from bolt guns, flamers, or greatswords. So you can have close combat, mid-range, or I guess long-range firepower added in your team. You're also getting those extra bodies, so great for objective-based games, able to hold the line. They also open up extra things in the archetypes as well. You can also equip them as well in any sort of mix or match order you want. You don't have to have a set number of a weapon type. So you can take 2 bolters and 2 flamers, or a sword, or 5 swords, whatever you feel like matches the situation the best. And there's definitely interesting synergies with all of it. There isn't too much of a difference between the archetypes that these 2 fire teams can take. Between them, they've both got Seek and Destroy and Security. The sisters just add Recon into the mix. Recon's not a bad choice for a lot of teams and mission dependent, but I definitely think Seek and Destroy and Security are the 2 stronger types playing into these types of units' game plans. Again, mission dependent. If the main mission is really pushing you to get out of your deployment zone and head to the other side of the board, sure, Recon could be one, but I think in most situations, things like Seek and Destroy especially is going to be a great one to play because your units are great at killing the opposition. Things like Headhunter, Challenge, they're going to be great ones to put on like your Custodes leader and just go character hunting. A really good way to grab some tac op points. Now when we do our comparison here with the Primaris Marine, the good news is the Primaris teams are a little bit better now. They've obviously got the extra operative added in, which makes them a little bit more of a usable team. I'll put it at that. That's about as friendly as I can be about it, but at least, hey, you can play them. And if we compare the 2 models here, the main difference here being the armor save, obviously the Custodes having a better armor save, and also having more wounds. Having an extra 5 wounds really makes a huge difference. And then comparing them against the lowly Guardsman, well, it's not really fair. Obviously the Guardsman has GA2 in their favor, but they've got the 5 up save, they've got 7 wounds. It's not really a contest. The big benefit here though is those guardsmen can carry a melter gun or a plasma gun, so they can still put the hurt on a Custodes in the right situations. But looking at those 2 comparisons, they do show you, I guess, why the Custodes are such a feared team. One-on-one, there's not too many units that are going to be able to stand toe-to-toe for them for too long. If you are facing the Custodes, you've got to make sure you have a number of ways to deal damage. This is probably going to be one of my shortest team breakdowns because realistically there's not that many units to look at, but each one is pretty good. The Custodian Guard Warrior you can see here, the guy that's going to take up most of your kill team. He can be armed with the Sentinel Sword and Storm Shield or the Guardian Spear. So the Guardian Spear is a very 40k weapon. It's literally a spear with bolt guns sticky tape to it. I'm pretty sure it's sticky tape, but that's how it works. This has the full range of a bolt gun, so no range limitations on it. It's also got piercing 1 on the critical. 4 attacks, hitting on 2s, and 3/5 damage. These are really good, especially for the fact that you're hitting on 2s, and that's the real strength of the Custodes. They don't have a whole bunch of the really high powered weaponry, but they hit so consistently that they don't need it. They will overwhelm your save dice is probably the best way to look at it. Plus, when you start rolling in a few criticals, which is going to probably happen, you know, you're rolling 4 dice, you'd probably hope for at least 1 critical. All of a sudden, you're taking away one of those defense dice from your opponents. You're going to be dealing damage every time you shoot. You've also got the option too, with these guys, through different ploys, they can shoot twice. Plus, when it comes to close combat, you can also still use the spears. They're hugely damaging, and you can fight twice. And who would have thought it, they're even more damaging in close combat. 5 attacks, hitting on 2s, 5/7 plus, lethal 5+. There's obviously huge drawbacks in this new addition to getting in close combat. You obviously usually go in knowing you're going to take some form of damage, but when you're throwing out 5 attacks and hitting on 2s, especially if you're the one who charged, you're really going to make sure that you can probably negate a lot of the damage coming your way and finish your opponent off really quickly, especially when you're dealing out 5/7 damage. Well, 5 for a basic hit is really big in close combat, and lethal 5 up means you're going to be getting some criticals in there as well. So technically you're one-shotting guardsmen in best situations. The other combination they can take is the Sentinel Blade and the Storm Shield. Sentinel Blade is a sword with bolters sticky taped onto it as well. So very 40k again. Main difference here between this and the spear in the shooting game is it does have the pentagon range, also dealing 1 less damage on criticals. So there's definite drawbacks to taking this, but the Sentinel Shield definitely makes up for that. This gives you a 4-up in vulnerable save. So again, all those AP weapons, one of your biggest fears as a Custodes, those scary weapons that take away your save dice, all of a sudden you're rolling your saves and you're still 50-50 chance to be ignoring things like plasmas, melter guns, all that good stuff, sniper shots. In a lot of ways, you're going to be negating and ignoring a lot of that wound, and that's still hugely powerful. And if 1 or 2 does get through, you've got the wounds to absorb 1 or 2 hits as well. In close combat, again, you're rolling 5 dice, hitting on 2s, and you're looking at 4/6 for your damage. Lethal 5+ hasn't gone anywhere either. That's still attached to this one. So these guys are really, I guess, your tank units. They're still dealing a lot of damage, but they're trading a little bit of their offensive ability to get a little bit more survivability and durability. The defense level is definitely a little bit higher, and that's what makes these two work so well off each other. The best way I've seen these guys be run, or my favorite way to run them, is to take 2 and 2. Then you've really got 2 tank objective holders or center of the battlefield holders who can really stride forward, hold down those key objectives, whatever they are. And then you've got your other 2 spear guys who are a lot more, I guess, free range. They've got the duality of being able to be great in close combat, but they do need to be a little bit more careful with their placement. They do still need to use that cover when they can, and obviously maximizing their charges, because these guys are still dealing out more damage. So you're wanting to get them in the ultimate charge and shoot zones, while the other guys really are just more there to bother your opponent and be really, really hard to shift. These guys also have the Emperor's Chosen, just to be super annoying. They also can't be wounded. So even when you do all that hard work and you get their wounds down, they won't be limping around the battlefield anytime soon. So just keep that in mind. For the Custodes players out there, fantastic. For the Custodian Guard leader, he can't get much better. There wasn't much they could do, so they gave him just the 1 extra wound. Great. So there's 3 different types of the Sisters of Silence, and we'll start with the Witch Seeker Vigilator. I wanted to start with these guys because, well, they've got really massive swords and they look badass. So these ladies obviously aren't quite as tough as the Custodes, but they're definitely no slouch. And in any other team, I think we'd be looking at them hugely favorably as being great operatives who can do a whole bunch. They've got the 3-up save, so pretty much wearing power armor. They've only got 8 wounds, and that's probably the biggest drawback to them. They're only slightly tougher than a guardsman, so very similar to your Sisters of Battle in terms of survivability. The Executioner's Great Blade here is a fantastic close combat weapon. 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, 4/6 damage, and again you've got lethal 5-up. Definitely seeing a theme with this team, that's for sure. They're really good heavy hitters in close combat, and it's the only option they've got. They don't have a pistol or anything, so keep that in mind as well. You can't get some cheeky shots off as they head in. And being only 8 wounds, close combat is brutal in this new edition, and they're gonna take some damage, and they don't really seem to have too many ways to negate incoming damage in close combat. They do have Aegis of the Emperor, which is definitely a tactic they can take advantage of, turning criticals into normal hits, but that's not always how they're going to be taking damage. If they're going to get stuck in and get stuck in a lot, I do worry about their durability. Next up, it's a Sister of Silence Witch Seeker. These are your flamer-bearing sisters, and they are a hell of a lot of fun. They have the same stats as a Vigilator. They've just thrown away the great swords and picked up some flamers. These flamers are the same as you've probably seen in a lot of other teams. 5 attacks, hitting on 2s, 2/2 damage. They've got range, pentagon, and they've got torrent as well with the circle there as well. So able to hit, bunched up troops. I think these units are perfect versus any horde teams. Taking 5 flamers is still a scary, scary proposition for any team to deal with. Even if you've got a high number of wounds, you're going to get your defense dice overwhelmed. Hitting on 2s, they're not going to miss too much. Man, that's a pun there. They're not going to miss too much, and there's going to be lots of options. And if you use them in conjunction with the Custodes, you've got these 2 units that are really distracting the enemy, keeping their minds on that. You're going to be able to get these models up the board, and they're going to be able to cause some trouble. So really powerful, especially for any matches that really encourage you to have to bunch up or fight around a lot of objectives. They're going to be great at clearing people off objectives. The only drawback I can see is probably once they have secured those objectives, they kind of can get left behind, especially if they're in the back end. They can't really participate with bolter fire or anything longer than their existing distance. So one of the biggest drawbacks that the Custodes will always face is who do you leave on an objective if the battle's sort of pushed to the other side of the board. So it can be a bit of a trade-off. They're all expensive units to leave behind. In close combat, they've got the gun butt there, and they're pretty regular in close combat once they take the great swords away, but we're probably wanting them to avoid that anyway. Hopefully you can flame everyone to death before they get too close. The last of the possible selections is the Sisters of Silence Prosecutor, a model with a bolt gun, and that's fantastic. There's nothing wrong with some good old bolt fire. It's super consistent in this edition. They can lay down a withering amount of fire, and especially if you take 5 of them, 5 operatives armed with bolters can definitely do a lot of work. 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, 3-4 damage. No frills for these ladies, and that's absolutely fine. These are a great unit to leave behind, and I sort of touched on that with the Witch Seekers. It's okay, sometimes you will want to or have to leave a unit in a position where they can't really, involve themselves with the battle more than holding objective, or you're wanting them to hold back to keep people off objectives and be able to have some long range firepower. So that's what these guys kind of provide for your team. Same again with their Fists of Fury here. They've got 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, 2-3 damage. So nothing too special in close combat, but that's not what they're there to do. And so if they're getting involved in close combat, well, positioning may have been an issue, or the game may not be going too well. Psychic Abomination is a trait that all of the Sisters models have as well. So with any models within Pentagon of the Sisters won't actually be able to use their psychic powers. And the other benefit is they also can't be the target of psychic attacks. So you might go, geez, that's a bit of a waste. And it is. There's not too many teams at the moment that have psychic actions. But I think we're going to see that change more and more as new things are released. We've obviously got the Warp Coven, the Grey Knights, the Nachman box set's about to come out. And it does look like there's 2 potential psychic operators in that team as well. So I think we're going to see more and more of the teams get the flavor of psychic powers that they should have, and that's going to make these models more valuable going forward. This could also dictate whether or not they're worth taking in your team. If you're going to verse a team that is very psychic heavy, like the Thousand Suns, or you're looking at the Grey Knights, then a really good chance to put these units to work and make them get amongst it. It's just whether or not you think it's worth not having the hard-hitting duality. But the Warp Coven especially really rely on those psychic powers to give their team, I guess it's the glue that holds literally some of their Marines together, but also their tactics are really focused about that. So with some clever placement, and if you're using maybe close combat operatives or you're using the Flamer operatives, you're going to be pushing up into that range anyway, and that really makes them interesting. Let's jump in and have a look at the strategic ploys. Aegis of the Emperor is a great one for negating some of that damage, especially on your Sisters of Silence. We sort of touched on that a little bit earlier. This gives you the opportunity to take any critical hits and turn them into a normal hit for their damage. So this can literally be a lifesaver for your team, especially when you're looking probably in turns 2 or 3, when you know you are going to come under fire. When you're setting up turn 1, using a bit of conceal, probably not as valuable. Even in that last turn, if there's a key objective to hold down or someone needs to survive, again, can be a real game / lifesaver in the right situation. Creeping Dread is one that is specifically for the Sisters. Once you activate this, if any models are within blue square of your Sisters operatives, I nearly said Sisters of Battle, your Sisters of Silence, then they basically get treated as being wounded. So they have all the worsting of ballistic skill. This is a good one if you have taken those close combat girls, but it's pretty situational. So it's really only if you're going to have a large number of the Great Blades, or maybe a lot of Flamers and things are starting to get really up close and personal. It's not fantastic, but it probably has its uses and it's time to use. Peerless Warriors is the fancy version of Bolter Discipline, that our Space Marines get, but obviously it's also incorporating their 2 strategic ploys, smushing them together so you can choose to either shoot twice or fight twice. This is really powerful, and I think any turn where you think you're half a chance to get a shot off at the opposition, you're going to be taking this one. It's 1 CP, and it's definitely worth it. Now on to the tactical ploys. Arcane Genetic Alchemy. Say that 3 times fast. This basically is just for your Custodes unit, and it means for 1 CP, you can turn a normal save into a critical save. So this is a great one for keeping those models alive who are going to take a lot of fire, especially if there is those surprise bad rolls where you rolled lots of 1s or 2s and you didn't save anywhere near as many as you thought you were going to be able to. this can keep your custodes alive for longer. And with such a small model count, even when you add the sisters in, you're still only going to be rocking 7 units. The CP to keep your units alive is really worth it. Brotherhood of the Demigods is one of the contentious ones. This was one that was definitely hit very hard by the FAQ because it was basically giving them another opportunity to cause mayhem. So they've definitely neutered it a bit here. This has been changed now, so at the end of the firefight phase, you can choose to do 1 free fight or 1 free overwatch action. This is a great way to finish off a model in close combat, shoot someone off an objective to stop them scoring a point at the end. It's still really powerful and really, really useful, just not to the degree it was before where they were able to pick up objects, where they basically had the whole gambit of things that they could do, charging, move. It was giving them far too much leeway with ways they could affect the game. So I don't mind this FAQ. I never actually got a chance to play them when they had this or play with them when they had it the old version. I've only read and heard the horror stories of what they could do. So I think this is fantastic change. Even if you're still a Talons player now, this is still a great tactical ploy for 1 CP. The last one is Talons, and as far as I'm concerned, thematically, this is one of the coolest tactical ploys I've ever seen. I'm not sure about how useful it always is. I think you've got a plan for it. Operatives with great swords, your flamers. There's a lot of duality in basically being able to choose either the Custodes first or the Sister of Silence, and then choosing either that are within blue square of each other, and you can basically chain activate them, but not just one after the other. You can actually mix up their activations, so you can use their APL in any order. So this could mean you attack someone with a flamer, then you shoot them, then you charge them with one operative, and then you charge them with the other operative. There's a whole gamut of ways that this can work. It's really, really cool. I haven't seen it used, I'd say, to its maximum effect, but as a Talons player, I think it's definitely one you should keep in mind, because I think that's probably what you'll see a lot of people get the best benefit out of it, is when it's not expected. Having those two models, having 2 teammate models within blue square isn't that unusual in a lot of games, but then all of a sudden, if they're able to activate together and cause mayhem in any particular order, I think that could be powerful, especially taking over things like the center of the board, taking key objective markers at key moments in the game. This is a very, very powerful combination. Next up, it's equipment. The first one we've got here is the Oath Parchment, and that's 3 equipment points. This is effectively giving a unit a free CP. So I think it's a very good spend of 3 equipment points. Although expensive, this team does lean very heavily into its use of CP. There's a lot of other teams that use their CP. The whole game seems quite CP hungry, but the Talons, especially in terms of survivability and maximizing what they can do, taking advantage of all their strategic and tactical ploys, anything that's going to help you save CP for re-rolls or not have to waste it on maybe that time you rolled 4 1s or something like that, this can definitely come in handy. Next up, it's Tangle foot grenades. I've started to really like grenades in this edition. I think this one's probably a little bit of a whiff for me though. It takes away 1 APL from an enemy unit within Pentagon. So it's not bad. It would limit, especially a lot of 2 APL units. Does it stop a close combat beast from being able to fight in close combat? Does it stop a gunner being able to move and then get back into cover, or shoot in general if they have to move to get to their position? There's definitely times and places for it. I'm not saying it's a don't take, but it's probably a little bit lower on my list, especially when there is things like Oath Parchments around. I think it has a place. It can be fun, but it is a bit situational. Next up is the Misericordia, the Miserable Accordion. We'll go with that. Each time a Custodes unit fights in close combat with one of these, they then get to roll a d6, and on a 3+, they inflict 2 mortal wounds. So in the very unlikely event that you've just fought something that survived you, this is a fantastic way to finish it off. Also, especially if it isn't like your second attack, or you just had a bad roll of some dice, which happens to the best of us, this is a great way to guarantee you can finish off those opponents and not have to deal with them later. It's also only 2 equipment points, so reasonably affordable compared to some of the other equipment in here as well. Don't forget though, this can only be taken by those armed with the Custode Spears. It can't be taken by the Storm Shield as well. Next up is the Psych Out Grenade for 2 equipment points. This is just for the Sisters of Silence. The Custodes can't take this one. When I first read the rules for this, 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, 1/1 damage, I thought there was a misprint or something was going to have to be FAQ'd. Turns out it's actually a bit lame against normal people, but is fantastic against Psycho teams. Who would have thought it? Sisters of Silence. This takes the damage up to 3/5 and makes it lethal 5+. It also works against demons as well, so keep that in mind. A team that doesn't get talked about too much, but the Chaos Demons are there and these grenades will do great work against them. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of a pattern what we're seeing with a lot of the Sisters of Silence stuff, and I guess it is true to the lore. Against Psycho teams, demon teams, they're really, they're really worth taking. But unfortunately, against a lot of other teams, it's really hard to knock out the Custodes from the team to take units that a lot of their equipment and abilities is really wasted against, I guess, a non-psychic powered or normal team. The last one is the vrantine faceplate. I hope I'm saying that right. 2 equipment points, and this is one of the other great ways to keep your sisters units alive. They're the only ones that can take it here. Not for you, Custodes. Once per battle, this lets you take a damage dice that was going to be inflicted against your model and take away 3 damage from it. This is a great one for close combat and what we were talking about, being able to negate some of that damage in close combat, especially because the sisters with great swords, they can't one-shot anyone. They're doing maximum 6 damage, so even a lowly guardsman could get a cheeky little get a little bit of a punch on in there against them. So this basically will take away that cheap shot and then keep your sisters ready to go for the next fight. So that's it. That's all there is. It seems like this video is a lot shorter than my normal ones. Sorry, you're welcome. I'm not sure which way that goes. Closing thoughts on the Sisters of Silence are, I really think they're units that are worth taking in the right situations, especially against psychic armies. What they bring to the battlefield, they seem like a different model against the right team. I also like the idea of just bringing them for the duality of what you can load them out. I like having a couple of bolters, a couple of flamers, and then another close combat option. So 5 units, lots of different duality, and then you put 2 Custodes in there, and it's quite a versatile team. Still a low model count, but the Sisters, 3-up armor, 8 wounds, they're not that bad. And having 2 flamers or 3 flamers running around the battlefield will still intimidate a lot of teams, especially those teams with only 7 wounds on their models. For you beginner players out there, 4 Custodes, great place to start. 1 box of units, they're ready to get on the table, they're easy to paint, they're fun to play, you will feel very powerful, and your opponent will be worried. When we look at the competitive scene or experienced players, no, this team isn't as good. It'll be interesting to see what happens when they do get a White Dwarf or a box set team further down the track. I wonder how they'll manipulate it to make it feel better or stronger or more unique. I think they're one of the few teams that I'm interested to see, because I don't know what they'll do. A lot of the time it does seem to be one of the abilities you're paying CP for becomes a team-wide trait, but this team doesn't really necessarily have that, so it's going to be very interesting to see what they do for them. This team really isn't a competitive team. You're not going to see them at the top tables or anything like that. Not because they're not good, I just think they're pretty limited, and good players with good strategies can beat this team. There's an intimidation factor, the aura of unbeatability, but that's not actually the case. Good players and good teams know how to take them down. And that's AP weapons is a great way for the ones without storm shields, but also there's things like brutal in close combat, and close combat seems to be another way. If you've got a large amount of smaller, cheaper units, you can bog them down and slowly plink away wounds. If you've got ways to overwhelm their defense dice, no matter how good they are, they're still only getting 3 defense dice. So flamers, stubbers, things that are putting out a lot of shots and hitting accurately, heavy bolters, are really still going to do some work on them. So they're not unbeatable, but they are a great mistake kind army, and I definitely recommend giving them a go. I don't have the hate, maybe a little bit of the fear, but I definitely don't have the hate for these guys. I think it's very lore appropriate how awe-inspiring and terrifying they can be on the battlefield. Well, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much. If you've made it all the way to the end, I really appreciate you watching. Really appreciate you following along. Please, if you can, take 2 seconds. Please do the things that everyone asks, but I mean it. It'd be nice. Please like and subscribe. We're really getting up there in the subscribing count, and the further up that goes, guys, the more video content I can produce and I can make, the more time I can put into this, turning into something a little bit more permanent. So please, those little things, those little clicks do actually add up a whole bunch for me as well. And please comment below, is there combinations of things you like with the custodes that you found make them powerful? Is there ways that you know to beat them? Chuck all that stuff down below, because let's get a good conversation going about this team. That's what I think so fantastic about making these videos, is I love all the community chat. I love hearing your thoughts. I love hearing the pros and cons of teams, and be really constructive and have points of view, guys. It's really great the more we can chat about this and tell us what you want to see in future videos. I'm slowly getting through the compendium. I should be through the compendium just in time for it to be fully outdated, but I'll keep these videos coming. There's also more of the tactical battle reports on the way. So if you enjoy those, there should be one. That'll be the next video that you see landing on the channel. Thanks so much for your time. My name's Reese. We'll see you next time on Threes to Wound.